been noticing a lot of stuff recently that has been appearing on in the comments section of not just my videos, but some other videos as well. This discussion about inceldom. Now, previously I had a conversation with a guy called Mr. Monday, and I think that we talked about that at great length and made some very serious points that needed to be made. But I think it's worth possibly revisiting that and adding some things, maybe rehashing some things, depending. Let me make one thing clear first. There is no such thing as an incel. There's no such thing as involuntarily celibate, because no one has the obligation to have sex with you. Ever. Nobody can really withhold something they're not obligated to give. Understand that. And then when you use a term like incel, you're basically implying that you're supposed to be getting sex from someone, somewhere, somehow. Well, that's not true. You are never, ever obligated to receive sex from someone. That's almost free market fundamentalist thinking. Well, there's a demand, so therefore supply will automatically be created, kind of thing. And that kind of pretty much is the free market version of sex, to be perfectly honest. So, I think it's important to understand that right away. There is no being involuntarily celibate. Celibate, by its very definition, is voluntary. And no one is obligated to give you sex. So you can't... So there is no being deprived of something that you are not... That is not an obligation to give you. However, having said that, are there men who don't have sex because they are unable to pull a woman in who wants to have sex with them? Certainly. Of course that happens. And it sucks. I'm sure it's awful. I'm sure it's almost a miserable existence. But having said that, I think it might be a little bit better to maybe understand that maybe it's not the lack of sex, but maybe it's the lack of genuine human companionship. Now, I know this is hard for some of the far left to be able to understand, but human beings do actually want to couple. Like long-term relationships. I know that's very hard for a lot of far leftists who think our natural state is polyamory, when that's completely ridiculous and flies in the face of not only the actual core state of human nature, but against all archaeological and biological evidence as well. Let's try to understand this from a materialist perspective, as we're supposed to, and understand it. Okay, let's look at it this way. When you want to have sex, it's because you want to feel good. Now, when a woman has sex, it's not exactly the same thing, because a woman risks pregnancy. No, birth control is not 100% effective, so the risk is still very much there. If they are going to run the risk of getting pregnant, they need to make sure that there's going to be someone there to help them not only just raise the child, but to be able to meet the material needs for it as well. I mean, this should not be something that's controversial to say. That's very real. It's a real problem that they have to face. Pregnant women can't work. Yes, I'm well aware that there is such thing as maternity leave, but in general, as someone who was raised by a single mother, it is incredibly difficult. And the more commodified society has become, the more difficult it has become. LOL, capitalism making things worse. What a surprise. But these are considerations that women do have to take that men don't have to take. Now, I know you can just say, oh, yeah, we'll just have an abortion. Well, what if you don't want to? Huh? You do realize at some point children do have to be born or the human race comes to an end, right? The problem is the very atomized way it's looked at. It's looked at upon a very individual basis. And, well, that's capitalism. That's the way it's going to look at everything. It's from a ridiculously atomized point. A woman is going to have to make sure that the guy can actually provide for the child. Or even just taking the risk of pregnancy. Is it going to be worth it? Now, you can make all kinds of obnoxious remarks like, oh, why does she only have sex with that guy who's a piece of shit and not a good guy like me? Yeah, well, anybody who has to consistently refer to themselves as a good guy, I'm very skeptical about, if you know what I mean. A lack of human companionship can actually drive people insane. I mean, we've seen enough examples of it where someone has lived in isolation for a very long time. They become socially maladjusted and can become literally insane from that lack of connection. So it's not unheard of. But the thing is, no one's obligated to give you that kind of human interaction, in that being intimate. So the question is, in a capitalist society where it's very clear that there is a diminishing ability of people to pay for their own lives, let alone pay for a child's life on top of it, how do you pull in the woman that you like when you have no ability to be able to take care of her, or more importantly, to be able to take care of a child? Well, you're basically asking an economic question of capitalism in general. Why does it keep failing to provide for the working class in general? And I don't think I need to have to tell you why that happens. But understand something. Relations between men and women are screwed. And I think that's pretty obvious. And we have capitalism to thank for that. This is not to suggest that human relations were, ideal under a feudal order or something. As capitalism continuously makes it harder for people to be able to afford to have children, less people are going to have it. Or have them. And the less women are going to want to do the things that will risk them with pregnancy if they can't take care of the child. Pornified culture, which a lot of leftists like to believe just doesn't exist because capitalism didn't do nothing with regards to human relations. It never ceases to amaze me how somehow commodifying human sexuality seems to be something that's just okay. Because commodification is bad when it's labor, but when you take an essence of a person, meaning their sexuality, and commodify, then suddenly it's okay. Because ideological consistency, I suppose. When you take that kind of human sexuality, you turn it into a commodity, you ruin it. You essentially do. You take the porn and you turn it into something that is not in any way, shape, or form attached to something that's in reality. Not only do you just turn it into a commodity, you come up with a completely ridiculous interpretation of what those relations are like in order to sell you a product, which is porn. And surprise, surprise, porn doesn't accurately represent how real life is. And that's another major problem. There's this pornification of culture that makes men think that women are there for sex. It has a subconscious effect that it's just like the porn. You just walk up and and then you have the sex. Believe it or not, that's far more prevalent than you might think, because it's one of those pernicious things that gets inside you and you don't realize is there. It's one of those subconscious effects of capitalism. And again, capitalism has all kinds of subconscious effects which Marxists would acknowledge and are supposed to. But then, for some reason, when it comes to porn, all of a sudden they don't believe it exists anymore. But I digress. The system is screwed. And the system is not only screwed, but is continuing to screw itself and everyone else even further. Complaining about not being able to find someone to have sex with you is secondary to the struggle of finding someone to even give you that companionship. Because keep in mind that if you're just looking for sex, not every woman is also looking for just sex as well. Maybe they're people who want companionship too. And when you're out just trying to get laid and you can't get it because the woman doesn't just want to have sex, they want to have a relationship and, connect with another human being, etc., you're essentially being an asshole. You are literally saying to that woman, sorry, you're only good for sex. Now, if two people just want to have sex, by all means go ahead. I'm not bashing that. The problem is not respecting people who do want to have relationships, that do want to feel human connections. Because there's not just that aspect to it. But there's also the aforementioned desire to avoid pitfalls of pregnancy, etc. So just try to keep that in mind. There's no such thing as an incel, because no one's obligated to give you sex to begin with. And that perhaps, just maybe, you haven't done anything enough to pull in a woman anyway. Maybe she's saying no because she doesn't want the risk of pregnancy and then being stuck the next 18, 20 years of her life with a child that she can't afford. Because the guy who fathered the child doesn't want to be a father, just wanted to get some for a night. It's a lot more complicated than you might think. Because the problem with incels is that they have never been a woman. They have never been in that situation that faced those risks, that has faced those kinds of needs, and faced those material conditions. So just try to keep that in mind when anyone tries to complain that somehow they're oppressed because women don't want to have sex with them.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.